Yo, party people!
What's up, what's up?
Alright, we're gonna wait for a few of you to jump on, but as always, we always introduce, this is Fix Your Shit, and we are talking about the low back. This is important, people. Alright, we got a couple of, she has something. What do you have for the back?
Oh, I have a low back ebook that you guys can check out on my link in the bio. And she has a 10-day challenge going on. You need to jump in that to make sure you're moving on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Isometrics, daily stretches to do, dynamic stretches. We're not doing a lot of static stretching because some people don't need that. So dynamic stretches to get you moving in the morning, daily exercises to do. And I switch up the exercises every 3 or 4 days so that you start hitting everything that you need to do in order to stabilize. We don't get you fixed. We're going to be all better in 10 days, but you should be on the road and building the habits to feeling better, right? So that's the point to that. So if you have any specific questions or anything going on with your lower back, please pop them in. We'll try to address them today. We're going to go over specific exercises for range of motion, stability, and strength, and why it's so important for the lower back, all right? So, Dr. Arnica, what do we do for range of motion?
First one up, we're going to rotate that spine. So, I'm going to have you on your side, arms out, and opening up. We should feel that all the way down our posterior chain on the back of our body as we rotate.
I really like this move specifically because especially if you are just starting to access spinal rotation, moving the arms instead of moving the legs is a much gentler way to get in there, right? The weight of your arm is a lot lighter than the weight of your legs. So you'll see people sometimes moving their knees or kicking their leg up and rotating. That's actually going to put you a little bit more out of control. So if that is bothersome to you, this is a really good alternative to do it. Yeah, it feels amazing. There's also ways, let me go grab my handy.
Ooh, yes.
Power reels, if you have not purchased one of these, please go ahead and do so. There are a million things that you can do for the shoulder and for just accessing some tension within your body. I like to use these for helping people try to start building that mind-muscle connection of like, hey, my upper back needs to be tight for squats. Or as we're doing these spinal rotations, you start getting some tension in your arms and pulling across. Now you're doing it with a little bit more intention and you're getting just a little bit more muscle recruitment as you're going through that range. So that's also, you can do it with bands as well. You obviously don't need a power reel.
Yeah.
I just love these things. Big fan. All right, what's another range of motion that we need to access when we're doing
cat-cow? Cat-cow, going into flexion and extension of the low back. Is it cat-cow? Cat-camel?
Cat-camel, cat-cow,
I don't know.
So we're specifically working the lumbar spine here, right? Isn't it really important to get lumbar flexion?
Depends. It depends.
We should have it.
Yeah, we should have it. Some of us have too much extension, and then we lose the fact of us having that little bit of curve that we're supposed to have in our low back.
Yeah.
So everyone needs a bit of flexion and extension, just not too much.
Right, exactly. We don't want too much. We don't want too much end range of anything, really. We want a controlled range of motion and a slightly limited range of motion. For our hypermobile people, you're dealing with end ranges that are just out of control, right? So what are we doing here?
So we're extending our spine by arching that back and making sure that we're having a fluid movement. One thing I don't like is we come down and kind of sit in that position. I'm not looking to sit, we're looking to have fluid movement of that entire lumbar spine. For some people who have issues in feeling this, because we just don't know how to associate that low back and the line of movement, I like to add in like a resistance band here, just so you can feel.
You know you can use this for that too.
Of course I can. How did I use that?
It goes on the other side.
Oh, we're fancy.
And now you're pushing into the band. But you can also use a long band for that too. It's actually one of the exercises that I think we did for the challenge. But yeah, you just push into the band, and again, it's just a biofeedback, and it helps you engage, and it gives you something to push on, so that you can be like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be using. Got it, right? Today's challenge post or email that went out was all about moving with intention. And when you're dealing with injury or pain, or you're in an acute state, it's incredibly important to connect with what you're trying to do. So when we're doing rotation, when we're doing lumbar flexion, why are we doing it? What are we trying to use? Do you need to poke yourself? Do you need to have some type of feedback mechanism that allows you to engage with what you need to engage with, so that you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, right? And then when we transition to higher level skills or something a little bit more challenging, squats, cleans, pull-ups, whatever it is, you can start making those connections during the higher level skills, and then your risk of injury goes down, right? It's very, very important to not just move, but to move with intent and to know why you are moving and how you're moving and what you're supposed to be using while you're moving.
Yes. Yes. All of what she said. I agree. Something else I like is the fact that we start on the ground. Like we start on our back, we start on our quadrupedal forward position. I like doing positions and movements in that way because if you can't handle it without having gravity and load and extra things on you, then when you do translate that into a squat, into single leg stance, then we're going to lose that form. So we got to be able to do it without gravity, without adding extra parts of our body. Can we just feel where our low back feels like before we load it up?
That's really important for learning breathing patterns too. Where's the first thing? How do you first instruct breathing?
Oh, we diaphragm through the nose. I honestly don't care if you ever open your mouth. If we can nose breathe, it's the best. So you get away from this and more of this.
Yeah, and usually I tell people start practicing breathing laying flat on your back, right? Because if you can do it unloaded and you can start getting that breathing pattern and engaging and bracing in, laying flat on your back, that's the first step. Then we'll go to a kneeling position, half kneeling, like one knee on the floor, one knee up. Can you do it there? Great, perfect. Now we'll try standing. Can you do it there? Great, now we're gonna try walking, right? But we're not loading you up yet, right? We're not doing, can you brace with squatting? Can you brace with deadlifting? Can you brace with kipping, pull-ups? You want to start with making all those connections in the most accessible way possible. And the most accessible way to do that is laying flat on your back.
Right. And I know it's not the sexiest thing to do. I feel like everyone skips over that diaphragmatic breathing video that I sent out. I'm like, you can do this, you haven't breathed after. So we gotta start there. Exactly.
Yeah, and again, if you are in an acute phase of pain,
best place.
Breathing is going to calm you down. Mind, body, and soul, especially body, is going to calm you down. So tap down. So spending time breathing, really telling your body, hey, we're gonna make it through this, we're gonna be okay. It tells your central nervous system to not freak the fuck out, and it tells all that musculature to calm down. Because what happens when you hurt your lower back?
Everything clears up.
Everything's spastic, right? And it's good. That's what you want to happen. It's a protection mechanism. It's like, oh, we gotta protect this. Great, fine. But you also want it to go away, right? You want that spasm to chill out and go away. Then you can go in and actually address the problem, right? Because what comes in, if somebody comes in and they're complete spasm and you go to adjust it, what happens?
Oh, you're not even touching that.
Right,
First of all, you don't even want to lay down on the table because you only want to stay in that one position.
Yeah, so
we
the best
gotta
thing
take care of the stuff around
breathe, calm down the spasm, do whatever you need to do in order to get that to just chill out. Walk as like a slow pace if you need to, but just walk, get moving, calm it down with some moist heat, whatever you need to do to chill out. Drink a glass of wine, calm it down before you're like, how do I fix this? What do I need to do? Blah blah, right? Like it's just you need to tell your central nervous system to chill out. So that's like if you're in an acute phase, or if you're in the gym and you're like, you pull a heavy deadlift and you're like, ah crap, I just hurt my back. Just lay down on the ground and calm down, right? It could just be a temporary thing, and if you just chill out, you can get it to, self-regulate. But if you try to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna push through this workout, or I'm gonna stay still, I'm gonna, rest, ice, compress, and elevate, then you're really gonna fuck yourself up, right? So just breathe and try to move, right? Yeah, we're gonna do a whole episode on rice. But breathe and try to move, yeah. Oh, fix your shit? Yeah, would be dope on a shirt. You're right. You're right.
It would be. Right. Ideas.
Maybe for Pride Month. Anyways.
Facts. I already got a rainbow logo ready. So.
A tie-dye, fix your shit. Okay, all right. So, range of motion. We talked a bunch about range of motion. It's hugely important. You do want range, but again, a controlled range. We don't want too much extension, too much flexion, too much rotation. Rotation to one side means you're probably lacking to the other side. All my single arm or single direction athletes, golfers, good God.
Yes.
Make sure that you work the other side of that rotation. We all have one side that feels much more comfortable than the other. You have to try to account for that and make that more symmetrical. Okay, stability.
We'll start off with the bear crawl. You want to demonstrate yours looks so sexy.
Okay. Okay. Bear crawl position. We got our knees underneath our hips and our hands underneath our shoulders. And the goal here is for you to slightly lift off your knees and not be shifting out of position, right? So we're going to find tension in our body. Grip the floor with your hands. Grip the floor with your knees. Keep that tension really bear down, brace, and then just lift your knees off the floor. Not a lot going on here. That's it.
But you feel so
much. Yep. What you don't want to see happen of ways to progress that. You can go to bird dog, you can put a band below your knees, you can do a whole bunch of things there. You can load it up with a plate on your back in order to give you something to push into.
Yeah.
Tons of things that you can do.
Neurofeedback. I like that a lot. I like starting with that bear crawl, the static crawl, just to cover the front of that core. And also moving into the side plank, which I feel like not a lot of people do correctly. Right. Or we progress too quickly and knowing that we can barely start on our knees. And our side plank is super important, especially for those QLs that fire up so much in our lower back. A side plank can really help us create stability in that position.
And that mommy hip.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of times where people will have a lack in their glute. Their glute just can't hold them up, and so they just collapse in. And I'm like, well, there it is. There's a piece of the puzzle that we need to put together.
Right. So, go ahead.
Yeah. No. So this would be like your introductory side plank with your knees bent. This is one of the most accessible ways of getting into that position.
And then pushing up. I like having our shoulder right underneath, so we're not coming out, we're not putting more pressure on our shoulder. If so, there's so many progressions, there's so many modifications, I should say, that we can do, so we're not putting as much pressure on our shoulder. But our goal is to be up on our side. And can we breathe? And is that side straight? I see a lot of this. I can't even do it. I can't even do it.
Like, you don't want to stick your booty out.
Right.
Make sure that everything is tight. A good way to make sure you do that is to tighten up before you lift up, right? You want to try to create tension and find the right musculature before you get into the position, right? Like the lift, all of your lifts start before you move, right? So when you're down on the ground and your hip is still on the ground, that's when you take that opportunity to tighten up, squeeze that butt, and then lift. You should start tight, stay tight, finish tight.
Yep.
Then you're done, all right?
Hold into that entire movement. I see a lot of, it doesn't matter what stretch or movement that we tend to, like you say, we lose it as we get close to that end range of control. Make sure we're controlling that entire movement. That's how we get stronger. Yep.
Yeah, or even like the side plank, if you do it, obviously the progression would be with straighter legs. You can lift one leg up. There's a ton of progressions all over YouTube. But you want to not progress until you have mastered the previous step. And that is for all of this. Do not progress your bear crawl into bird dog in the bear crawl until you're able to hold that isometric bear crawl without the bottom falling out, right? Without losing that tension. The side plank, if you're struggling to keep your hip up, or if you're feeling it zing you in your lower back in the course of 20 seconds, then you're not ready to progress. And side plank, hugely important. One side is going to feel better than the other. On mostly everybody, right? It's kind of like trying to brush your teeth with the opposite hand. One side just feels more coordinated and stronger than the other. Make sure you build up that strength on that weaker side, because that is going to directly translate into your ability to do step-ups or squat with equal pressure or do deadlifts, right? Like it's just hugely important, or even just walking or running. Like that's a lot of the hip dropping out, and if you can't stabilize in that side plank, that is a huge indicator that you are lacking strength there, so you want to address it, right? Side planks are hugely important. Big fan. Okay, so how much do the hips help with stabilizing the back?
So much. A lot of the issues that I see a lot of clients, and the issue isn't in their low back, it's because their hips do not have range of motion, they're doing too much stretching, they need to be strengthening, and things like that. So we got to make sure our hips are moving, because if they're not having full mobility, then it has to get it from somewhere, and most of the time it lands and falls in our low back.
Yep, and a lot of times I will dose out isometric split squats or isometric squats in order to create stability in the hip, specifically so that we create stability in the lower back, right? So if you are struggling to hold an isometric split squat for 10-15 seconds, then I'm gonna say, hey, your hips are not capable of doing all these walking lunges or doing all these step-ups that you're trying to do or doing all the squats that you're trying to do. And so your lower back is saying, well, hey, I'll help out, or I'll take some of the pain, or I'll take some of the pressure. And then your back gets all freaked out when it's actually a hip issue, right? Or when we're hinging, if our hips don't have the ability to load and to for you to use your hips, the low back will do it. It will do it.
It does everything.
But we
That's
don't want it to.
Right,
Exactly. So stabilizing for the lower back includes a lot of stabilizing for the hips.
Right.
What about carries?
Yes. You know you love carries so much.
Carries.
I like them a lot because it's challenging one side. We talked about the QL, specifically our core. So many times that we can just strengthen the lateral core, it will solve so many of our problems. So being able to carry one thing on our side, especially we do it in everyday life. When we go grocery shopping, I refuse to make a double trip to the cars. I'm coming in like this, 10 bags on the arm. We do it in everyday life. So make sure that we can brace our core, we're breathing, and we're holding ourselves straight up when we do the carry. Instead of this, it lets us know that we actually can hold that tension throughout our core.
Yeah, and I like to challenge people to do a variety of different carries. Can you do a single arm front rack carry? Can you do overhead carries and maintain that bracing pattern? So many times people will go overhead and then they just lose it, right? So then we're putting a lot of compression on our lower back and we're not protecting anything when we're overhead. So can you do that in a stable way? Single arm, double arm overhead carry. Can you do front rack isometric holds with the barbell before you're even trying to do front squats, cleans, anything explosive, thrusters? Can you do back rack isometric holds and actually bear down and brace without getting an arch in your lower back? This is all very important to do before you do all the other fun, sexy stuff.
There should be precursors. I think it should be a precursor to can you even be in that position isometrically before we add weight, before we squat. Because if you cannot, once we add more positioning, you're going to lose that core. You're going to lose that stability. And it leads to the pinch and the compression in the low back. And then months later, like, man, my low back hurts, and I don't know why.
Yeah, no, it's definitely about building it up at a rate that your body can tolerate and that your mind can make the connections with. If you do too much too soon, your mind is spinning trying to catch up, and now you're doing heavy cleans, and your body's like, I don't even know how to stabilize at the top of the front squat, or like in that front rack position. And you're like, wow, that was steps ago, and it feels like you have to regress so much, but if you just take those steps in the beginning or throw them into your warm-ups regularly or just make sure that they're dosed into your programming, then you can keep that up and you can make sure that your body knows exactly where it needs to be, what needs to be turned on, and how to do the lift in a safe way. Very, very, very important.
Right.
Talk about that all day long.
Right. I totally agree.
All right, and so strength.
Yes,
move
strength.
on to strength. What do we need to do to strengthen our back?
Should we start in with the hip hinge? Because I feel like we can talk all
Move
day.
this out of the way.
Okay, let's move the table to discuss this hip hinge. Alright, so favorite position we do a lot of things in is the hip hinge. And what we notice is we tend to flex or arch our low back instead of using our hips because either we don't have the stability or mobility in our hips. So, starting in that position, I like to tell people if you can put your fingers literally on your hips and feel that your hips are hinged and how they move, is a good place to start. Our goal is to keep that back as flat as possible, create tension in that core as Ty talks about so much, and being able to push our butt back without breaking that low back line, so without causing any more extension or flexion. To be able to push our butt back and hinge. I like to have people start maybe up against the wall so they can know what that feels like to lean back. But this is a position that some of us don't tend to master, and then we go to pick up weight, or we go to deadlift, and we collapse down. So being able to control our back and just be in that hip hinge position before we add weight to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's another good way to do it. Sometimes I'll see that people just have a hard time connecting all the pieces. Kneel down, right? It's easy to start figuring out what needs to move when you take the knee and the feet and how the feet engage to the floor and how the knees have to be. Take that out of the equation. Put your hands across your chest. Stick your booty out, right? Just start making it very, very accessible. So, if it hurts to hinge, should we not do it?
Well, we definitely hinge. Yeah. We need to figure out, right. We need to
That
figure
was
out, right, that was definitely a no.
No.
We have to figure out maybe we're not having that mind-muscle connection, or we're not sure what muscles you should be using to hinge. And that just comes with us helping y'all and cueing you, better cues specifically for you to walk through it. But it's a movement that everybody needs to know and master.
It's a basic life skill. That is how we are supposed to pick things up off the floor. That's how we pick up our kids. That's how we put things down. It's just something that should be part of your regular ambulatory life, right? Like you need to be able to bend over and stand up. If it is not accessible now, like you're dealing with pain or you're dealing with acute pain, something, you need to figure out a way to get back to accessing it. So I know a lot of people say, well, it hurts for me to bend over like this, so I always lunge to pick things up off the floor, or I'll squat to get things. The less you do it, the less you're going to be capable of doing it. So at some point, you gotta say, all right, fuck it, I'm gonna start doing this again. And you have to start from the beginning and start introducing it to your body. And if that means it takes you 6 months to build up to a kettlebell deadlift, That's fine. Take that time. But don't just ignore it if it's problematic for you. And if deadlifting or hinging does bother you, get in there and address why. You know, it could be that you have one leg that's longer than the other, or there's like, you know, leg strength discrepancy, or you just never learned to hinge properly, and so every time you do it, you're doing it poorly, and so then it bothers you, right? So there's just, you should be able to pick things up from the ground and heavy things. It should be your strongest lift. Deadlifting should be a strength. Work at getting it better.
And there's always ways to regress. Like if that means that we're having issues even kneeling and doing hip hinge, and then we progress back to figure out what muscles are firing, what muscles need to fire. Maybe we just start to see if we can engage, can we even extend, can we come up and have this hollow roll close back position? Because if we can't hold that, or if we don't have that intent and movement with our core, then anything we try to do above that is not going to work. So there's always ways to regress back so we can make sure that we have that mind-muscle connection to be stronger when we are looking things above.
Yeah. And to that same effect, if squats, if hinging is actually a really good strength for you, long limbs, I can deadlift all day long. I cannot deadlift for 6 months and it'll still be there for me, but the second I stop squatting, they're gone. And so actually squatting is what bothers my back, not hinging. So if I do not keep up my squatting strength or work on my positioning with squats, that's when it falls apart. So I got a post coming up about squat dominance versus hinge dominance. One is going to be stronger than the other on you, and one is going to feel a lot more natural for you than the other. It doesn't mean that you just, oh, I like to deadlift, so I'm going to deadlift. Deadlifting doesn't hurt my back. Squatting hurts my back, so I'm going to deadlift. You want to attack the weakness. You want to go after the one that is causing you the problems, because that's the only way you're going to get better, and that's the only way that all the pieces are going to come together. So squatting strength is huge for your lower back strength, right? Like you should be able to access good deep squats, and you should be able to load a squat. If you cannot currently, that should be a goal within your training program. Like, let's build you up in a way that you can load properly and have a good ratio with deadlifting and squatting strength.
Yes.
Also single leg strength. I'm talking about all the legs here because they're just hugely important in your lower back, especially for all my fitnessers out there, right? Like, we want to do all the heavy things, but how important is single leg strength to the lower back?
We have so many asymmetries and so many leg dominance. And if you play sports, it's a totally different thing. I'm working with a 14-year-old now who's been playing soccer since she was like 4. And 1 foot, and she's strong on that one side and the other. So we have to balance out as much as we can from one side to the other.
Yes.
Single leg is so important. We all have it, right?
Everybody wants to put their best foot forward. Everybody will start with their good side. They will just do it. And so that's a good way for you to find out which one's your strong side, which one's your strong side. Whichever one you like to do first is generally your strong side. But that discrepancy when we go to do bipedal movements or like squats and deadlifts and everything, if you have one leg that is more stable or more stable or stronger than the other, it's going to work harder. And you might be, hey, my left leg is weaker, but it's always my right side that hurts. To us, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
Because one side is working a lot harder, and it's usually that stronger side, and then it just goes, and it lands right up there, and you're like, well,
we get the falling apart, especially we get a lot of falling apart in that lower back. Everything lands in that lower back, and the majority of the time has nothing to do with the lower back whatsoever.
Yeah.
It takes the grunt of everything.
Yeah, and it can come from the top down too. So we're talking a lot about from the low up, right? When we talked about this in the Unfuck Your Body series with the lower back, it also can come from your thoracic spine and you doing too many overhead pressing patterns or too many kipping pull-ups when the shoulders aren't capable. The thoracic spine is not letting you get into that range. Something else has to allow you to get there, right? So always assessment is huge. And strength testing. Big fan of strength testing when you want to deal with lower back issues. Like, how do you squat? How do you hinge? How strong is your squat? How strong is your deadlift? And how strong is your single leg strength from left to right? And stability, right? So
it's huge. Single leg stands, and along with squat is one of the best tests I use with every person. I
love
see
it.
how you move.
Yeah.
See how the body is together. Yeah.
Single leg stance is the first thing I put in there. I'm like, nope, let's just work on standing on one leg. Let's figure that out first. Yeah. All right, and I think that's about it.
Yeah, we got some
covered
questions. We did cover a lot.
The question that
I don't know. Oh, cool.
Yeah. So 10-day back challenge is going on right now. You can actually sign on for that at any time. It's open all the time. You will start with day 1, even if you start today, even though we're on day 3. So just get in there, link in the bio, type training, and it will be in there. And then Dr. Anika has...
Yeah, coming up. I have a whole lot of stuff coming up behind the scenes. So right now there is a free low back ebook that you can access on my link in the bio. Check it out with those movements. As well as in a couple of weeks, I have some things coming up. So stay tuned for that and I'll announce it.
A lot of things in the works, people.
Yes.
All right, tell all your friends, share this with everybody that you know and love, and tell them that, hey, this is not a death sentence, right? The lower back can be problematic. It is a pain in the ass, but you can address it, and there are tools that you can have, and the more armed you are with knowledge, the better prepared you'll be, and the easier you will get over it, because it's the freaking out that will fuck you up, right?
Yes.
So do not freak out. Do not think that rest, ice, compression, elevation is the key. It ain't for anything.
It's not.
And so arm yourself with what you need in order to feel better sooner, and then attack the weaknesses. You cannot ignore this shit. You have to go after it, and you have to be mindful about it. You have to be intentful with it, okay? All right, I'm gonna get off my soapbox now.
These are all these things. Yes.
We'll see you next week with the upper back.
Yes.
Closely related to the lower back, but we're going to talk about the upper back. So if you ever have any questions or anything, reach out. And if you want us to address something specifically next week, you let us know.
I expect to hear a lot from those overhead athletes with that upper back going on. Facts.
Yeah.
See y'all next week.
Bye.